So we are also very lucky today to be joined by Ed Chan, Verizon's SVP and Chief Technology Architect. So 5 months ago, when Verizon first announced that they were going to provide 5G service in 2018, I think we all wondered, can they really do that? And I guess the answer is yes, you can. So we've long talked about the power of fixed wireless to deliver new competition, and Verizon is now making that a reality. So tell us about it, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for I was glad to take that out of the picture earlier. I thought that would work for me. Okay, now this is the other one shows up now. I'm going to try to dummy this down a little bit because I was going to thank Cristiano for bringing Photon into the discussion today. Even in all of the wireline discussions I've had, I was never able to sneak in the word Photon in there as well. So I'm going to touch on that. And then I have the safe harbor statement here. I hope there are a lot more people here who can answer this than I do, but you can find more about this on our website. Okay, so quickly to go over a little bit of where we believe, similar to most of the speakers have spoken about earlier today, there are about 3 different areas that we believe that 5G can really change the way in which we live and the way in which it's going to affect our lives. But the foundational piece that we believe is a wideband experience. It's about the ability to deliver the speed and throughput that we have never seen before. So this is one of the basic tenets that would drive not just the normal 4G connections, but the same kind of innovation that's going to bring on from that basic functionality. But like we said, there were other capabilities that you can see on the left side of this picture, that the latency improvements, the ability to actually mix and match the different kinds of capabilities that the network has, and actually deliver the different kinds of services, what we generally call network slicing. So the ability to provide that kind of capability based on the different needs of the application is what 5G is built on. It's not about just a single user application that 5G is building for. It's building it for all of the applications that we're trying to get to. So when you see all of these capabilities put together, you have the ability to actually create things that essentially make it feel like the cloud is in your back pocket. That's the way we talk about it. The way that we think 5G with this responsiveness, with this ultra-low latency capabilities, with the ability to also have the massive bandwidth to deliver at the same time, we believe that you can create new things and new use cases that has never been seen before. We think of this as the ability to digitize our country. It's not just about digitizing every single end user today that's reading news on your smartphone, but it's the ability for you to actually build new industrial applications that actually automates the way in which we do things. So I want to talk a little bit about building the 5G platform. What are the things that we do? Why is it that they're important? The first one was about standard. Now in 2016, one of the things that we did was get together with a set of partners and industry partners because we saw the technologies are actually available. We saw the millimeter wave capabilities, we saw massive MIMO capabilities, we saw a lot of things that were already in place. But back in 2016, if you were to ask folks, they would still tell you the standards would get done around 2019, we'll start getting stuff going in 2020. We said that couldn't be true. So we put the folks together and say, look, I believe that there are much better ways of doing this than just following the longest way of getting to the standards. But we know that was going to be necessary as well. So we pushed the ecosystem to say there could be done, if we assemble the right folks and we can drive the whole pieces together, and long and behold, you look at where we are today, we have a standard ready. Back in 2016, folks would tell you we don't have that. So we are very happy that now we see actual standards happening. Let me touch on spectrum and dummy it down a little bit. For every generational switch in 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G now, there are a couple of things that changed. The bandwidth that each of the generation of technology happens, it jumps. Back in the 3G days, we're talking about a couple of megahertz here and there, and in 4G we jumped to tens and tens of megahertz. And then in 5G we're talking about hundreds of megahertz. I forgot who said it earlier. Look around the rest of the world. What do they tell you about the minimum bandwidth required for you to deliver a 5G experience? It's 100 megahertz. So I don't want to talk about who's got what different band, but think about what it takes. It's a little bit more than what we already have in the system today. If you look at 4G, we have aggregated 10 and 20 megahertz of spectrum. We're not making that leap yet to adding hundreds of megahertz of spectrum together. The other thing that you see from each of the generational shifts is the fact that we always added new spectrum. We didn't just use the same one. At some point, we repurposed the spectrum we have, and we all do. Everybody's in the journey going from 2G spectrum to 3G, become 4G, and now eventually they will all be repurposed to become 5G spectrum. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about what do we need to do to get hundreds of megahertz of spectrum that all of the operators will need to actually bring service to the market. So let's not confuse the situation here by playing with what we've got today. Because I think somebody said this earlier. If you look at Japan, you look at Korea, and you look at China, they know that they want to bring in the amount of spectrum that's necessary to deploy 5G. They don't just say, oh, what you have today is great enough. And this happened for every single generation of technologies that we have shifted from 1G to the 2G to the 3Gs. So why would we believe 5G would be different? I believe that will have to be the case as well to bring new spectrum to the market. And the FCC did a great job with millimeter wave. I have never seen anything move so fast before. So I want to encourage the fact that we can go after the rest of the mid-band spectrum in a very similar way, much like what we did in millimeter wave, so that we can get on top of the 5G race. Now, I touched on technologies already, so let's not go crazy. So just one point to be made about moving up in the mid-band and the higher band spectrum. One is that the antenna sizes are shrinking. I think John said it earlier. When you shrink it in size, it makes deployment a lot easier. Gosh, I remember going to zoning meetings when folks talk about, oh, we really need you guys to bring small cells in. I don't know how many of you have been into zoning meetings. My goodness, I remember people were saying, my communities, I need you guys to bring small cells in. We brought small cells in. Now it seems like we're still in the same place as we did 15, 20 years ago. But the antenna sizes and everything is already shrunken down. It should not be the same process anymore as we used to do. We'll also say that from a millimeter wave standpoint, all of these signals are actually not interfering with each other. It's a special technology that you can take advantage of, and now you have these massive capabilities to actually provide services that you haven't seen before, unlike the back of the old ways where, from a general perspective, a lower band and mid band, you're putting in signal out there that are interfering with each other, and they're overlapping in times. Now, passive infrastructure, everybody talked a little bit about this, but we were a little bit lucky in starting this journey 4 or 5 years ago when we knew some of these capabilities are going to be necessary. So we have spent a lot of time putting fiber into the network. We spent a lot of time densifying the network, bringing small cells into the network. But that took a lot of time. We created a CRAN architecture many years ago to say, look, I believe this is how we're going to need to do things so that we can implement small cells in a much faster and efficient manner. So that is one of the things that we've been doing. But that is still not fast enough if you look at how it needs to be done in order for us to stay at the front of the 5G race. So from a 5G opportunity perspective, we built based on an agility way of doing things. We talked about software-defined capabilities. We talked about how we can be agile, but we looked at how the West Coast have innovated. We talked about the small startups in Silicon Valley. But why wouldn't we do the same thing from an operator perspective? Why don't we start building with what is called a minimum viable product? What would be the first initial use case for 5G? With that kind of bandwidth, we thought, why not? While we're improving the battery life for the mobility, the first thing we ought to do is to bring home broadband. And then immediately follow that, now you can get mobile broadband with it because now you have tested the millimeter wave capabilities, you have tested the capabilities of 5G, and now you can improve the battery lives and taking the rest of the same capabilities into a mobility workplace. And finally, I talked a little bit about this on industrial automation, but I would end it this way. I go from places to places, and I know a lot of you do too, and when you land into an airport from a foreign country, you recognized how much digitization had taken place and how much automation takes place in the rest of the world. And I look at where we are in the US, and I feel like we haven't been digitizing our infrastructure. And if you think about how that could be done along with 5G that enable that kind of digitization of not just the municipalities, but nationally for the way we do things, and you combine that capability with 5G, I really think that innovations is only limited to our own imagination. And I really think that in order for us to be successful, the operators, the technology leaders, we all got to lean in and build things a little bit ahead so the innovation can happen, because guess what? In 4G, none of the operators predicted the fact that the kind of smartphone innovation happened. We thought we were building dongles for PCs. And then now all of a sudden, look at Uber, look at everything else that we've got. It is not the way that we're going to be limiting ourselves and building the network knowing everything's going to happen. You got to build and get ahead of it so that the rest of the innovation can happen. That's what operators do. Now, we need some of those ingredients that I talked about earlier to make it happen, but I believe that we got to build this, but build it in a much quicker way in order for us to lead this race. Thank you very much.